We hear so much about boomers and millennials, but what about that generation squeezed right in between? You know, the quiet engine room of our society. Today, we're diving into the silent resilience of Generation X.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. Boomers, millennials, Gen Z. I mean, we hear about them all the time, right? Their struggles, their wins, how they're changing the culture. But there's this huge group of people, born roughly between 1965 and 1980, that just seems, well, invisible in the conversation. So the big question really is, where is Generation X?
And if you think about the whole idea of a generational brand, the contrast is just stark. Boomers are famous for their world-changing movements. Millennials, well, they're defined by documenting and sharing their world online. But Gen X, they're the ones in the background, just quietly getting the work done. No big announcements, no real fuss.
And that really leads us to our first section here. We're kind of framing them as the forgotten middle child, stuck right between two massive and, let's be honest, culturally loud generations.
I mean, really think about it for a second. They aren't flooding your social media feed with selfies or fiery opinions. They hardly ever seem to be asking for a pat on the back or validation for what they do. It's a whole pattern of behavior that's so different from what we see everywhere else. So you have to ask, why? What is it that created this quiet competence?
And here's the absolute key to the whole thing. You just can't understand how they act today without rewinding the clock. The answer to this puzzle isn't really in their adult lives. It's all in their unique childhood.
Which brings us right to the heart of it all, the latchkey experience. Seriously, this one single concept is pretty much the foundation for everything we're about to unpack.
So, let's paint a picture. It's the 1970s, maybe the early 80s. Divorce rates are going up, more women are entering the workforce, and all of a sudden, it's totally normal for kids to come home from school to an empty house. They'd have a house key on a string around their neck, and they were basically on their own until their parents got home. These were the original latchkey kids.
Now, there's actually a scientific term for this kind of upbringing. It's called a high-contingency environment. Sounds pretty complicated, right? But it's actually super simple. It just means that if you burn your after-school grilled cheese, well, you're eating a burnt grilled cheese. If you forget your homework, there's no parent there to bail you out and rush it to school for you. Your actions had immediate, real-world consequences because there was no adult around to be a safety net.
So what does growing up like that actually do to your brain? Let's move on and see how this experience builds a very, very specific kind of mindset, what you could call a survivor's psychology.
See, living in that high-contingency world tends to create what psychologists call defensive pessimism. The internal monologue, that little voice in your head, goes something like this. Okay, I'll just expect the worst. That way I can only be pleasantly surprised or, hey, proven right. It's a coping mechanism, really. A smart strategy for emotional self-preservation. You're just never caught off guard.
Okay, let's talk about another huge trait that came from this. Today, if we have a question about anything, we have the entire internet right in our pocket. But for a Gen Xer trying to write a school report, the process was, well, let's just say it was a little different. Before there was Google, there was this.
The card catalog. This thing right here was your search engine. And just look at that process. It really was a hunt. You had to physically go to the library, find the right drawer, flip through all these cards, figure out the Dewey Decimal Code, and then just wander the aisles hoping the book was actually on the shelf. The sheer effort it took just to find information created something researchers call deeper encoding. Because you had to work so hard for it, the information just stuck with you more.
So, let's put it all together. We've got this generation of radically independent, a little bit pessimistic, but also incredibly resourceful problem solvers. How does all that translate to the world we live in today? Well, that brings us to our final section, the bridge generation.
And let's circle all the way back to our original question. Knowing everything we now know about their upbringing, why are they so quiet on social media? Why don't they broadcast their every thought and success?
The common misconception, the easy answer, is that they're just not that tech-savvy. But that completely misses the point. The reality isn't a lack of skill, it's a choice. Their online silence is a modern form of that same defensive pessimism we talked about. It's a learned emotional armor. I mean, why would you invite public praise or criticism when you were raised to be totally self-reliant and to get your validation from simply getting the job done?
And all of this leads us to what is probably their most critical and, yeah, often most invisible role in today's world. Because of their one-of-a-kind life experience, they are the ultimate bridge generation.
So let's just look at the unique strengths this creates. They are the very last generation to remember an analog childhood, but they were the first to grow into a digital adulthood. This makes them the ultimate translators between the old world and the new. They are radically independent thanks to those latchkey days, and they are fiercely loyal, not to authority, but to actual competence. They can speak the language of a boomer CEO and a Gen Z new hire, basically bridging a massive cultural and tech gap that most of us don't even see.
You know, we live in a world where it feels like the loudest voices are the ones that define everything. But maybe we've been overlooking a different kind of strength. So I'll leave you with this thought. What if the most important, the most stable, and the strongest bridges in our society are the ones being built in silence?